Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the reopening of the channel. So it's been a week since we really put out any content. We had to kind of take a step back and think of time. We realized that in trying to put out so many videos and so much content that it was getting put down and bogged down. We both still have jobs and got to do our thing, but we do want to make this work. So now, welcome to session number 1 of the official reopening on Coffee and Convos here, starting on a Monday. We're going to be doing 3 videos a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, try to vary up the content. I think Coffee and Convos is going to stay consistent. So with that being said, we'll get straight into the news. We'll do a little bit of talking, a little bit of looking, and a little bit of Google search barring just to kind of see what's going down on the daily, give you a nice little talking to about it, and hope that you do enjoy this very laid-back session. Oh, had a great weekend. Fell ill last week. Took a while before I could actually put out some music or write anything or do anything. But now that I'm back fully on the mend, had a productive work weekend and had a super fantastic out and treat yourself day with my lady, I'm ready to get back on it. Gonna be bringing you the news here. I'm going to start off with what they've been talking about up in the game studios. So something that's been blown around for probably about the last year is talking about an Apocalypse Now video game. And that's exciting for a lot of reasons. One, if you're a gamer, you've always kind of wanted to touch on or at least visit the Vietnam War as a shooter, a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter. A lot of elements to be terrified about in a game like that. So especially with the next-gen power we have on consoles, I think a lot can be done jungle-wise. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Vietnam War is the lack of understanding of where the enemy is, who the enemy is, and what's actually going on. So most game studios, I think, have been scared to touch this title just because we weren't necessarily the good guys in that conflict. There was really no clear side in division. Obviously, we were doing so to halt the spread of communism, so kind of harkening back to World War II and saying we need to stop the spread of tyranny and promote liberty and freedom, democracy wherever we can. Now, in this war, it definitely was the term quagmire was used, so that's kind of what we were stuck into. We had a lot of things going on politically and why we could only take inches and not miles and where to hit the enemy. Basically, as an army, we were a nuisance within that country to try to disrupt the lines of supply. So without there being necessarily clear objectives, aside from scout for enemy forces, go out and take this hill, this position, we were so concerned with how much geography we had taken. We're playing it like a game of Risk and trying to fill up as many squares as we could to try to make claim that we were indeed winning. We had to garner the support of the American public, and as we know back here, in country during that time, we had the hippie movement going on, a lot of anti-war protests, intellectuals and grungy kids alike were coming out to try to protest what we felt was very wrong. We were voiced, and it was one of the first times that the media really had a huge effect on the conflict that we were having. They could show this gory and realistic footage brought to the homes of Americans every single night. So people were really on edge and getting to see the casualty reports. So numbers that generally would have looked small, which are still terrible for a loss of life in general, now looked a lot bigger. People had a very visceral reaction, and there was a lot of flack that the media caught over time about how they were presenting it to people. So to get to truly explore that conflict, we had movies and film a couple years later that brought it a little more to light and people's interpretations. One of the most important, of course, being Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. So you kind of got to check your source material on that one. We'll be getting into that. Of course, it was based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, talking about a man's journey upriver. Now, this is the same thing, spoiler alerts ahead, by the way. The same thing, you have a captain who's part of the Special Forces, played by Martin Sheen, who's supposed to be going upriver on behest of I-Corps, or 2-Corps at this point, so one of the Special Forces handling units, heavily involved by the CIA. He is to go upriver into Cambodia, where we weren't actually supposed to be operating, to relieve of command Commander Kurtz. To relieve of command one Commander Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando. His methods had become unsound, according to the CIA briefing that he had before he was sent up. It's to be a solo mission upriver, taken by a speedboat, in which the crew would become the rest of the cast of this movie. It is more of a psychological movie than a war movie. You still, as a war movie fan, get satisfied by seeing a lot of in-country shots. I know that it was filmed in the Philippines, so it had a similar latitude, similar vegetation, and general climate that you would have in Vietnam. So this journey begins, and you learn much about the war and a lot about the internal monologue. Now, if you've never seen the movie, a lot of it's shot in this noir style where you have Martin Sheen narrating over the top. Apparently this was an afterthought in the movie, which is strange because when you watch it, it's such a central element to the production of the film. You really get to look into the heart, so to speak, of this character. Now, the different thing for a lot of people is you're supposed to be sympathizing with a murderer. I mean, this was somebody who had assassinated higher-up military officials in the North Vietnamese army, taken out Viet Cong soldiers as well, but had a specialty for working alone, giving his special forces nature. During this film, you watch the evolution of the character, you watch him grapple with the reality of what he's really doing, and one thing that's great about this film is you never truly, see the enemy. You never see the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong running around and doing things. You are aware that they're there are battle sequences, but it really aids to the horrifying nature of the jungle. They knew their country obviously better than we did, and they were using it to their advantage. We were all just kind of bumbling around and attempting to figure out what it was to have jungle warfare and how guerrilla tactics needed to be evolved and adapted in order to more effectively fight the forces at hand. So, to never really see the enemy, you get the true scope of how terrifying it is. You have a bunch of 17 to 22-year-old kids who are running around on a lack of sleep, always on alert, waiting to get into this action, and then when it finally does kick off and happen, there's a lot of confusion as to where to shoot, what's going on, how many are there, because the forces knew their land so much better than we did. Now, this is amazing for a video game because it gives you this really awesome psychological horror aspect to it. The one thing that they talked about specifically is Francis Ford Coppola, the director of this movie, is actually going to be working with the game studios to try to bring to light a stunning visual and epic, psychological horror feel to it. Even they had said in a few articles that I had read that if you're looking for an in-depth, fast-paced, pulse-pounding first-person shooter, it's not necessarily the game that you were looking for, which is okay with me. I'm very cool with playing stuff that, if it has solid gameplay, it has an amazing story that you can follow along with, and it's really well done, absolutely no problems with that. I myself am a fan of first-person shooters, but at the same time, I would rather have a game with an engaging story than just something that, say, a company like EA or DICE milked out to try to make a couple quick bucks off of. Since this game hasn't really been touched that much, or this game topic hasn't been touched that much, Vietnam that is, it's going to be very interesting to see how it does. Now, if you are looking for something a little bit different and more in the Vietnam style where you can go ham on people, as it were, I know Far Cry, with their 5th installment here, Far Cry 5, in Hope County, Montana, that there will be a season pass that includes DLC. There's going to be a Mars expansion where you're trying to fight the spread of an alien race. There's going to be a B-movie, I guess 80s or 90s themed zombie style, which every studio wants to do, and of course a Vietnam style called Hours of Darkness. We haven't really gotten much confirmation. This is a new release within the last week that they've been talking about, so we can assume if it's anything like Far Cry Blood Dragon, you get about 10 hours of gameplay per expansion in the DLC. I think Hours of Darkness is actually up first to come out, so I will be very excited. Now, I kind of figured Far Cry 5 was going to be a little bit of a flop. Just looking back on the franchise, the third game had a great story, very engaging, and it was an awesome open world. Very much putting man against nature and man against man at the same time. So you have this internal struggle that you get to read, which as a player gets you more immersed into the experience, obviously. Far Cry 4 was still great. They upped the mechanic, and I felt like the combat was much cleaner. But at the same time, you lost a lot of story elements. It was really loosely held together by a country's civil war. Now, the stylistic gameplay, the setting, the elements, and just the general scope of the game, what you can do, your freedom with tactics, definitely made up for a weaker story. But I knew that when Far Cry Primal came out, and they were saying, let's take it back. Let's take it way back, like early man-hunting Mammoth. Really cool idea. I still had fun playing some of the game, but I never actually got to finish it and never purchased it, which shows that I kind of lost interest in it. Now that they came out with Far Cry 5, they've had some time to work on it. It's a fresh setting, it's a fresh take with American characters, focused on a cult leader trying to take over this town in Montana, and you have to kind of beat back that insurrection using the zeal of the American people. Obviously, all these games coming out right now have a very political tone to them, especially given current events and the political climate of what's going on with our nation. But at the same time, I think you can expect better things. The Season Pass definitely gives me some incentive to get it. I think to see different adaptations, Ubisoft is kind of testing their market, and they realize that they've alienated some of their players, so they want to give this opportunity. I saw a poll earlier last year about what locations Far Cry players would like to see the game visit. I know one of the top rated ones was Vietnam, or to go back even further and maybe do a Wild West theme. So I think they're kind of testing their content via DLC, to realize the series to where it needs to go, to ultimately make the players happy and to make for an experience that's not just watered down and another first-person shooter. Now, Ubisoft has done a lot. Of course, they're involved in big business, so with things to come in the future, one thing we all worry about as gamers is more of the loot crate bullshit. Because, dude, that gets so old. There's nothing more frustrating than, like, trying to get good at a game and trying to unlock all these achievements only to realize you have to pay a couple bucks to get this new loadout or to get these new bits of clothing. Now, one thing I'm fine with, if you want to have people who are dumb enough to buy clothing for their characters, that's fine. You know, people can pay that money, and I'm sure you'll still get the whole younger market who's not necessarily using their own cash to buy it. But at the same time, when you make only weapons and perks, some certain upgrades only unlockable through loot crate content, it's very annoying. All gamers are pissed off about this, which is why we all root for the indie developers, hoping the big business doesn't get as much of their hands into it. Now, the beautiful part about living in today's age is that people can make a video game from their living room. If they want to build it from the ground up, they have the experience and the software, they can most definitely do it. So it's very exciting. I love supporting indie developers and seeing what kind of shit comes out, because they do have a fresh take on things. It's games for gamers, made by gamers, which is about as good as you can get it. Now, that being said, you get a lot of content that's kind of just specific to that playstyle and that video game genre. With me, that's still okay though, because it means people are invested into it. Every genre of video game, just like movies or music, can be appreciated for what it is made art-wise. Video games to me are super badass, just because I love movies. I love all the entertainment content from it, but even more I love immersing myself into a story and getting to play through it. That's why I enjoy survival horror games and stuff like that, because it does make you invest yourself into it. If I know it's a first-person shooter and I'm just gonna pop back, beginning of the level, I'm not really too worried about it. But when I have to do some nerve-wracking shit over and over and sneak past people, makes it terrifying and really puts the stakes a little higher for me to want to play better. So, incentives all around. Let's go ahead and go to our session now, break away from the video games if you're not so much into it. I'm just gonna pull up the Google search bar, see what's trending this morning, give a little chit-chat. Alright, there's really nothing in the news. Nothing depressing anyway. NCAA March Madness tournament bracket, we will not be talking about sports on this channel. WWE Fastlane card, we will not be talking about wrestling on this channel. Winter storm snow forecast, personally I'm tired of snow. I live in a place where it's been snow on the ground. It's been snow on the ground. There has been snow on the ground for like months now, so I'm super just tired of hearing about it, talking about it. If it snows, it snows. It's not going to be any worse than any other time. I do feel bad for the Northeast and the East Coast in general, though, because they're getting hit super hard. Definitely a year of weird weather. Definitely need to be aware of climate and its effects, not only on us as a nation infrastructurally, but in general, and how that will affect our trade, how it affects third world countries, things like that. And that's another video for another day, though. That's more of a serious Coffees and Convo than a video game-based Coffees and Convo. Coffee and Convos. I got a cat. One thing that I kind of I don't take issue with it, because, judge me for what you'll judge me for. But a lot of people, when I start talking about video games, they know what it's all about. Not a problem. They get it. They get why people do game. But at the same time, they're like, oh, that's cool, but we can't really connect on it. I found some of the most genuine people that I've actually enjoyed sitting down with are just nerds who enjoy nerding out about stuff that they nerd on, which is dope for me. I met a dude in GameStop yesterday. We were looking around and asking about stuff, and literally had a 25-minute conversation with this dude about what titles are coming out, why indie developers are dope, and how business is screwing over the gaming community. So you can always meet some pretty cool people when you walk in there. Now, I don't get why people have ever given me shit about oh, you just play video games, blah blah. That's not all I do. It's not like I just sit at home and do it. And even if I did, fuck you, because I'm gonna do that if I want to. So many people sit back and will literally binge 5 hours of TV and somehow justify that over but I'm still more of an adult than somebody playing in a video game. And I don't necessarily see that as true. I'm making my mind work. It might not make as much sense to a lot of people, but I mean, dude, there are practical math skills that you don't necessarily get to practice on a day-to-day basis when you don't have much money. As far as budgeting and bills, that's easy. That's base rate addition and subtraction. But when you start talking about video games, especially survival video games or anything like that, you're monitoring resources down to the number of, or down to the quantity of what you have. So how much food do I need to consume to be able to go this far? What type of resources am I going to be acquiring in this adventure? Like, is this worth the cost-benefit analysis and doing all that and stuff? It's practical math that I really don't get to use otherwise. So if I want to go explore an alien solar system, or if I want to go, murk some aliens, I'm talking a lot about space video games. I like sci-fi, in case you couldn't tell. But if I want to go do that, I don't think that's any more of a waste of time than somebody who's binge watching 4 seasons of Shameless. Not that shows aren't great, not that things aren't badass, but it's not necessarily as much of a waste of time as people like to think. It's like watching a movie, but immersing yourself completely into what's going on, and I find that pretty attractive as an alternative for time. It's a creative outlet as well. I've talked about that before. If I can't write music, or I can't put out anything entertainment-wise, I'll either read or watch a movie or get lost in something that's a completely different world so I don't get bogged down. Writer's block is a real thing. It happens all the time. Even if it's just a morning and you're frustrated and don't know what to jam on. So when I go escape to a video game, that's my solace for the day, Like, I have now BioShock the Collection, so I definitely have some Let's Plays coming on that one. They did the remaster, which is exciting. We just saw the 10-year anniversary of BioShock being out, so maybe we can expect a new BioShock video game. I do have it in the works, hearing that the publishers and designers behind BioShock are working on a new game centered around some teenagers I think it's called Blackout Club, if I'm not mistaken. It sounds pretty cool. If it's anything in the same style and has the artwork, detail, and attention to creativity that the BioShock franchise had, I think it's going to be badass. That is one thing that was very attractive about the series. It's a first-person shooter, survival horror mashup where you really don't know what's going on. It has a deep story, a deep lore to it, and you figure out more as you go. Makes you want to explore every little corner of the map and really take in the scenery. Everything from the old school vintage prints that they have hanging up to the music that's playing in the background and the storyline that goes over it. And one thing that I did notice when we started playing last night is just that they do use a lot of the same voice actors to do different characters, which is fine with me because they're quality voice actors. They did it right, and they had a tonality that would very much go with the 40s to 60s era of American public and how people spoke in the higher classes. So it was pretty interesting to get to go back and hear that, but I'm picking up on a lot more things that I didn't catch the first time because, let's see, 2008. Yeah, I was quite young when that came out. So I think BioShock was a little over my head when what I was looking for was a Call of Duty 4 type of feel, or a Saints Row where I just got to do whatever, or another Grand Theft Auto. But the older I've gotten, the more I've started appreciating those deep and more immersive storylines and all that comes with it. I can hear my neighbor. She's walking her dog again. This is an ASMR video. What's up? How's it going? Okay, never mind. She's back inside her apartment now. She's loud. If you guys don't know, my neighbor screams at her dog a lot. And I don't know why. I don't know why she does that. But it's like she tries to reason with this dog. Like why it should go outside. Like it's obvious why it should go outside. It's gotta piss. I don't know. I saw a bird kill a snake today, so that was pretty cool. Felt pretty patriotic. Very symbolic. Say the early bird gets the worm. Apparently the early bird gets the snake. And it's not even early. Hell. Yeah, it happened at like 11 o'clock. So I guess the relatively late bird gets the snake. And more meat than the worm. I don't know, there's a proverb in there somewhere. There's the lesson to be learned. There's allegorical content that we can all learn from. One thing I saw in the news the other day, apparently we're probably not going to get nuked by North Korea anymore, so that's cool. Apparently there's going to be talks in the works between Trump and Kim Jong-un. It's something that a North Korean, I guess, leader has been looking for a long time, as a summit with the United States president so that they can be recognized as an official, like, power of nations. And there's a lot of divisiveness going on over whether these talks should be had, what will be discussed, and since there's no really clear goal, is it just denuclearization? Is it all talk? Is it all talk and no show? We don't know. Yeah, that's yet to be determined. I think things are going to be fine. Generally, I like to think that people are smart enough to not want to blow up the entire world. I think we realize that just fucks everything up. You drop one nuke, here comes another million. So definitely not worth it. We've all seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Let's just hope that it can clear back up and be fine. We have a lot of stuff to look forward to. I think as a country and as the world in general, we can see a lot of progress coming in the future. Things always get kind of weird before they get better, and even though we may not be happy with who's doing what and who's in control, there will be times coming where our voices will be more important. And I know that sounds like a highly optimistic thing, but genuinely I do believe that with these next couple generations that have come out, there will be more care. Most people, as always, especially the older generations, feel like the younger ones are what's going to ruin us. Don't get me wrong, I see internet culture and meme culture, but we grew up in a different sort of time of the internet to watch the evolution of that. Things are gonna be alright. People are smart enough to wake up and be like, hey man, we probably shouldn't do this, or we should probably do more of this. Whether we actually take vocal action and do things the right way or not, yet to be determined. People do kind of suck still, but we have nowhere to go but up, hopefully. As always, keeping it peaceful, keeping it hopeful. Remember to call your U.S. senators if you're unhappy with anything. Remember to talk to the people who are in your city government and the officials when you don't feel happy with the way things are going. We've seen a sharp decline, since the 60s, I believe it was. No more town hall meetings and associations that used to be like community staples, the Kiwanis and the Elks Lodge and yada yada, random stuff. Even though not necessarily completely culture shaping, but it used to be a heavy part of American society. Now people don't go as much. I think with the internet, we feel like we have all the information we need, we can ascertain and form our own opinions, and thus isolate ourselves a little more from everyone else. Not necessarily a good thing. We do need to talk more. We need to have these uncomfortable conversations as individuals, as communities, and as a nation. But it's very difficult for people to want to say anything because, one, either they're just assholes, or two, they don't want to offend people, but they have a legitimate message to say. So in learning how to reword and how to interact with people, kind of breaking from this internet stigma of I'm going to call you a dipshit just because I can, which is very tempting always, to really think about it and try to get both sides of the fence. If you don't agree with somebody's opinion, that's totally fine. But you just have to take into account why they're saying what they're saying. What side of the fence do they lean on, and how does that moral and ideal spread across people that are generally related to them platform-wise. It's always something to look into. You need to get both sides of the fence before you can make a decision on anything. And I think that's one issue older generations have with us, is they feel like, well, I've heard this mentality so many times. You go to this college where they teach you these liberal things and you come back and think you're an expert. No, I don't think I'm an expert. I've just started asking more questions now. But that makes people uncomfortable. I'm not asking them for a bad reason. I truly just want to know the truth and the answers to why things are the way they are. And if I form my own opinion from it, then I've seen enough of it to realize that. And it doesn't mean my opinion can't change as I get older and I learn more, obviously, but I understand where they do come from, because when you're older, you have life experience, you've watched it all unfold and happen. And unless you're just an ignorant piece of shit, I do trust the opinions of my elders on a lot of things because they've watched it unfold time and time again. Now, granted, a lot of these people are stuck in their ways and started believing things that aren't true because they don't look through the same avenues of gathering information that we do. They read clickbait just like younger people do, and are like, oh, that's the truth. Because they grew up in a time where the news was the news, and why would there be fake news, and what fake news is fake news. But I think most adults are kind of on the page that media is just bullshit in general. It's invested in by 6 companies that control all the production, or I think 5 companies now, maybe, after this big merger we just had. 5 companies that control all media that's put out within America. And it's hard to say that there's no corporate interest there because numbers don't lie. And it shows where money comes from and why it gets put into certain things. But even so, that's why the internet is a great thing. You get to source and look for your own information, figure out what reputable sources you do choose to listen to that try to put out the most unbiased opinion. And even if it is biased, why are they trying to put it out that way? Yet again. So a lot to be watchful for, a lot to be thinking about. As always, you gotta stay woke. And I don't mean that in some weird countercultural, revolutionary way. I just mean literally, look into your sources, look what's going on. Don't just read the clickbait, even if it's negative or positive about Trump. Look into it and see who produced that. See who put that work out and what they're connected to, because that's the most important part of why the message is being spun that way. People get paid to write these stories. That's how it works in the media business. You put out what your company is telling you to put out. We need a certain message. We need a certain feeling. People need to look at us this way and view us as this part of society because this is our demographic that buys the most from us. Immutable fact of how media works. But it doesn't mean you have to let it control you. You can still buy into stuff and not feel bad. Society is society, and you got to put your 2 cents into it, and they will take their $2 back from you. It's just how it's going to work. Hopefully, things will get a little more settled in here in the next couple of years. I think there's going to be some major changes within media, whether it be evident right away or not. Things are going to be starting to be presented differently. I think we have an interesting another 4.5, 5 years ahead of us. A lot of world-shaping events that are going to go on. But as always, stay hopeful, stay peaceful, stay positive, and try to just keep a good eye out for what goes on. You never know. Things could change, things could get better or worse, but the most important fact remains to stay informed, and stay informed by credible sources. So on that note, I do hope you've enjoyed our little session of coffee and convos, everything from video games, media, news, personal information, musical content, coming right at you. 3 videos a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Mark it on your calendar. Come check out the content. If you don't like one video, you probably like the next one. So in that regard, I do hope y'all have a great day. Stay woke on a Monday, stay chill, work hard, make some money, stay informed.